Hello, welcome to this channel. My name is Janet. I'm working through the King James's Bible. Today I am in the book of Kings, part 2, and I'm working through chapters 14, 15 and 16 today. Now there's a lot of details in these chapters, so we're going to be covering different kings, the changes of them, and please excuse my pronunciations of each of these kings. Plus, we're going to go on how long they reigned for and some of the acts that were carried out. Now, a lot of the details are in the Book of Chronicles, which it refers to in these chapters. It can get a bit confusing. Hopefully, you'll be able to stick with me through this. So, without further ado, let's get started. So straight away we start chapter 14. We learn that in the second year of King Joash in Israel, Amaziah becomes the king in the Judah tribe. And he's 25 years old when he takes the stage of king, and he reigns for 29 years in Jerusalem. We learn that he did what was right by the Lord. Apart from the high places, which they made sacrifices there and also burnt incense. So that was outside of the Lord's temple, which is against the will of God. So those were the things that he was sinning. But apart from that, it says that he did good in the eyes of the Lord. Now, King Amaziah, his father, was killed by his servants. So as he takes the reign of king, he has all of those servants killed. He does not kill their sons, because it says that in the book of Moses, that it's just the fathers should die for the sins, not the sons. So all of those servants are wiped out of his palace. He also kills 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt, and he takes over the area of Selah. So next we see the battle of the two Israelite tribes, unfortunately, and this is instigated by Amaziah. He wants to go to war with the northern side of Israel. And King Joash of the Judah tribe, he does not want to go to war, and he just tells him, just stay at home. I don't want to deal with this. But he won't have it. So they meet at Ben Shemesh, war is raged, and the Judah tribe are defeated and they flee back to their tents. Now King Joash then has his revenge. They end up capturing King Amaziah at Beth Shemesh. They then go on to loot their Lord's temple. They take the gold, the silver and the treasures from there, and they knock down the wall of Jerusalem, so their defences is then knocked down, and they take what they looted back to Samaria with them. So it looks like the Lord was on their side at this point. Now for the full details of this civil war, it's referring us back to the book of Chronicles. And then we learn that the King Joash, he dies, and he is buried in Samaria. Then Jeroboam II, because we've had a Jeroboam before, this is Jeroboam number 2, that's his son, he takes over his reign. And King Amaziah, he lives for another 15 years after King Joash's death. So the people of Israel who are under King Amaziah are not happy that they have been defeated by the Judah tribe, and so they plot to conspire against him and have him killed. And that's what they do. They kill him, and then they put his son in his place. And his son's name is Aziria, and he's only 16 years old. And we learn that he is one of the greatest kings after King David. He builds Elath and restores that to the Judah tribe. So now we have the summary of Jeroboam, the king of Jeroboam II, remember, in Israel. So 15 years into King Amaziah's reign in Judah, we see Jeroboam II reign in Israel. He reigns for 41 years, and he sadly did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So this means he was worshipping false gods, and he was leading Israel into sin as well. Now during his reign, he rebuilt the entrance of Hamath to the Sea of Arabath. So God is using Jeroboam, even though he's sinning, to get him to sort of lift up the Israelite tribes more towards him. So he's giving back cities in this way. So Jeroboam rages war, and he recaptures Damascus and Hamath. And then after that he dies, and he is buried in Israel. Then his son Zachariah reigns. So this closes chapter 14. So in chapter 15 we're going more into the summaries of these different kings, and we start with 27 years into King Jeroboam's reign of Israel, Aziria becomes king of Judah. And remember, he's 16 years old, but he reigns for a total of 52 years. He did good by God, except again those high places where they have the sacrifices and they burn incense, they still remain and are used. Now we learn that God struck him down with leprosy. Why? I had to find this out. It wasn't actually in this chapter. Basically, he'd gone into the temple of the Lord, gone to the altar, and he started burning incense there. That was like against God's laws. So he got leprosy, and then he is then isolated from ruling. So his son takes over his commands. He's sort of following what he tells him to do, and then he'll obviously carry out the commands because he has to stay in this isolated house. And this son is called Jotham. And then his father dies and Jotham becomes king of Judah. And the rest of the details here, again, go back to the book of Chronicles. So during the 38th reign of Aziria, king of Judah, Zechariah then becomes king of Israel. And he only reigns for 6 months. It's not very long, really. He does evil in the eyes of the Lord, so he's sinning, worshipping fake gods. And we learn that a man called Shallum of Jabesh kills him in front of his people, and he then reigns in his place. So Shallum becomes king of Israel during the 39th reign of King Aziria in Judah, and he only remains king for 1 month. We learn that a man called Menahem, who is the son of Gadi from Tirzah, comes to Samaria and kills him. He then reigns in his place, and again the details, that book of Chronicles. So coming from Tirzah, Menahem, the new king, went to Tibsah. Are you keeping up with this? And he attacks that area and he takes it over. And it was pretty brutal because he killed pregnant women while they still have their child in them. He ripped their stomachs open. It's just awful. So he's a pretty evil king. So 39 years into King Azariah's reign of the Judah tribe, Menahem became king. He reigned for 10 years. And he obviously did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Now Pul, king of Assyria, came to attack Israel under King Menahem's reign. So what he does is he gives the king 1,000 talents of silver. And that's to support him in keeping control over the Israelite people. That's what he wants him to do. So he's a bit backhanding. He's giving him money to keep him out of their area, but to support him in controlling the Israelites. So he gets the wealthy people of Israel to give up money. They have to give 50 shekels of silver to the king of Assyria, which is what they do, and then he goes back to his land. So in the 50th reign now, remember this king Aziria, he is one of the best kings after King David. He's still reigning in the Judah tribe, and then on the Israelite tribe we then have Pekahiah, who is the son of Menahem. So this is when he becomes king of Israel. He reigns for 2 years, and obviously, like his father, he's evil in the eyes of the Lord. Now Pekah, who is one of his officers, conspires against him and has him killed. And then Pekah becomes king of Israel. So now we're at the 52nd year of King Aziria in Judah. He is reigning. This is obviously his final year because that's how long he reigns for. This is when Pekah becomes king of Israel. And he reigns for 20 years and is a pretty evil king as well in the eyes of the Lord. Now King, I'm going to say TP because I can't pronounce these words. So King TP of Assyria took many cities from Israel. He wasn't the one who was going to be paid off like the previous Assyrian king. He wanted the land, not the money. So not only have they been attacked and all of this is going on, Hosea, the son of Aliah, conspired to kill King Pekah, who is the king of Israel right now, and so then he next becomes king. So there's a lot of killing of kings as we're learning, as we're going through all these. Like they don't like the king, conspire against him, kill him, then they take over the reign. So now we have Hosea as king. So in the 2nd year of King Pekah of Israel, Jotham, the son of Aziria, becomes king of Judah. So we're moving over to the Judah side again. He's aged 25 and he reigns for 16 years. and he does good in the eyes of God. But remember those high places? Yep, they are still kept in place, so not all good. We learn that he built the upper gate to the Lord's temple, and the rest of Jotham is in the book of Chronicles. We also learn here that God sends Rezin, the king of Syria, and King Pekah of Judah. So he sent these basically as a mission to get some changes going towards what he needs in the Israelite tribe. Jotham then dies. He is buried in the city of David, and then his son Ahaz, he takes over the reign of Judah. And that closes chapter 15. Are you keeping up? I know this is a lot of information, but let's keep going. Chapter 16. Now it's 17 years into the reign of King Pekah of Israel when Ahaz becomes king of Judah. He's only 20 years old when he becomes king, and he reigns for 16 years. And sadly, he didn't do good in the eyes of God. He worshipped Moloch, the pagan god. So King Rezin of Syria, remember he was sent by God, it said in chapter 15, and King Pekah as well of Israel, we learn about these here, they come to Jerusalem to wage war on them. And they besieged King Ahaziah, but they couldn't overcome him. Now the king of Syria, he captured Aleph and drove the people from Aleph. So he's got that land now, that belongs to Syria. And the Edomites went to Aleph and they end up living there, and they live there to this day, it says in the book. Now King Ahaz sends messengers to King TP, remember, of Aziria, which is not Syria, it's Assyria. So again, very similar names but different places. Now he sends messengers to this king because he wants to be saved from the enemies. Obviously these two kings that God has sent, remember, King Pekah and King Rezin. So he gives him silver and gold, and he decides to help him. Obviously, money talks. So he takes over Damascus, and he takes the captured people from there to Kir. And he kills King Rezin of Syria. So he is wiped out. So he's helped him in that way. He's wiped out that king, and he's now got Damascus. Now King Ahaz goes to Damascus to meet this King TP of Assyria. And that's basically to offer his submission, so he is now really under the control of this Assyrian king. And when he's there, he sees an altar that he likes, a pagan altar, and he tells his priests, one of his priests gives them the designs, and he gives them to take back with him to build the altar. So his priest goes back, builds the altar, and when the king returns, he then starts changing the whole court area of God's temple to fit this new pagan altar in there. And this closes our chapter 16. The rest of the details here are in the book of Chronicles if you want to find out more about the acts of King Ahaz. So I know that was a lot of information to take on board. I hope you were able to follow along. I hope this was useful for you. So what I took from all of this changeovers of kings, we can see that the Judah tribe are following God's laws more than the northern Israelite tribe. They seem to be sinning a lot, following false gods, that kind of thing, whereas the Judah tribe, they have the high places that are not places to really sacrifice to God, should be just in his one temple, whereas they've got these other two places they're using as places to sacrifice and burn incense. So the northern Israel tribe really need war really to happen and to put them into oppression like it did in Judges. He has to keep going over this to get them to submit and then become followers of his word. How he's going to do that, how this is going to continue, what will happen to the rest of the kings, we'll either find out in the next coming chapters or we'll be referred to Chronicles to get the full details of listing it all out. So thank you for following along with me, and I'll be back again soon with more chapters within the book of Kings 2. Hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye.